Not this coming week, but this week, anytime from now, exactly. Now, how was the process itself? And also, we'll be looking at the IEBC. Now that the chair of the IEBC is actually leaving the stage, what does that mean for the commission? Joining me on set is Cliff Ortega. Thank you so much, man, once again, for coming.
Good morning, Brian. Yeah, thanks. Great to be here.
Great to be here. Yes, now we are becoming a family. You're part of this. So, yeah, thank you so much once again. And just because I think we have a story that will actually usher in this conversation on Matter CS nominees and the report that's supposed to be tabled. Director, is it ready so that you can play that and get back to this conversation? All right, so we'll be getting back to that. But Cliff, let me get to you. This is the thing. CS nominees vetting happened the whole week up to Saturday, and we've seen 22 cabinet secretary nominees taking to Parliament and being grilled and asked questions. From where you sit, let me just take what you make of it first.
So, on one hand, we are happy that under our constitution, that this is a requirement. Procedurally, it looks good that you're not just appointed as a sort of faceless individual into high public office. But of course, we have a long way to go in terms of the impact and the outcome of that process. Now, it's unfortunately, it's a political process because you have a situation where the Kenya Kwanza coalition has won the presidency. The president nominates these appointees, and they have the majority in the House. There's no way we can expect Kenya Kwanza then to torpedo the nomination of its own party members or its own coalition nominees. So the onus to do that, or to challenge, to grill intensely the nominees, then falls on the minority. The challenge with the minority is, I think there's still some turmoil around Azimio, and their voice is not loud enough, because when you look at that committee or that panel on appointments in Parliament, you see the chair is the Speaker of the House, but he's a Kenya Kwanza nominee, you know. Then you have the majority leader, also from Kenya Kwanza. Then after that, in fact, after that, you have the Deputy Speaker, who is also from Kenya Kwanza. So the first three questions are from your coalition, you know. So of course, they're not going to be tough questions. Then after that, then you have the minority side. So the challenge we have, and it's not an easy, there's no easy solution. There's no way, unless you had a situation where the House is held by the minority and then the president appoints, then maybe.
Would that be a good thing if we had the House being held by the minority? Probably we'll see proper, you know, accountability and all.
I think you could, and of course that's the only time that logically you'd probably even see a nominee being rejected by the House. Yes, but I think in recent memory, in fact, since this process began, we've seen that once when Monica Juma was rejected by the House a few years ago, but that was for different reasons from what people expect. Not really, it wasn't really about integrity and that sort of thing. I think there were other side issues that the parliamentarians were looking at. So again, it's a political process, so it's not going to respond to logic and the way that people would like to see an independent process, because it cannot be, by definition, totally independent.
All right. Yes. This is what I want to get into, because you say the minority now has the task to actually do some proper grilling when it comes to, you know, vetting these CS nominees. Now, when we've had in the political arena, different sides of the political divide saying we are all in government, it is the responsibility of Parliament to do the oversight. But how we understand politics in this country, even in Parliament, Parliament will, you know, go in line with whichever side of the political divide they fall on. So in terms of doing the oversight properly, that does not occur. So when we get that, what does that mean for the country when we don't have that clear definition, or rather role of these particular members of Parliament? They know what they're supposed to do, but political affiliations or party affiliations actually, you know, take center stage.
The short answer is that it's actually not so much a parliamentary process, but it's a cultural process for our country. Now, in many democracies around the world, you would not either be nominated or accept nomination when you have some of the controversy that hangs over the heads of many of our nominees. That's just a cultural thing, you know. It's an individual sort of integrity and that sort of thing, because you're not supposed to use 50 million Kenyans are relying on you to set the policy for a given office. So you would imagine that you don't want to come into office with a sword dangling over your head, you know, whether it's a corruption case, civil charges, your own personal lifestyle and that sort of thing. I think the most robust vetting that we generally see on our screens is in the US Senate, when they are vetting judges and that sort of thing. And there, you can actually pull out of a nomination or fail to be approved by that house, even for something you did as a teenager. And we've seen that before. We just have not reach the same level of personal integrity. So it's the fault is not really, I mean, you can blame the nominating authority, appointing authority, but I think we need to get to a point where we as Kenyans are able to accept our shortcomings and not insist that we must come into them, because there are very many qualified Kenyans. So we don't need anybody with anything hanging over their heads that will be a distraction. Let's keep striving and try and go for the best. So hopefully next time we see.
Now, this is the thing.
Yes.
Are we making a progress, or we keep getting worse? Because when you say we are growing, but when it comes to matters integrity, those are not some of the things that we actually pay so much attention to. But it will give people hope if at all we were looking at it and saying, by the way, last time we did this. This time, I think we have quite a small number when it comes to people with questionable integrity. But are we making progress when it comes to holding that bar, or we are just, getting worse when it comes to?
So the big difference between 2013, which is the first time that we had a government under this new constitution, and now, is that obviously we've shifted from technocrats to politicians. Now, naturally, because of our adversarial political process, and also the way that this outgoing regime used, weaponized many aspects of government. Now, there are people who have genuine grievances about the sort of cases that they were charged with. And then there are some who are slipping through the cracks, because I think that some have been charged with serious offenses, but they probably get away with it because the whole thing has been corrupted by the political process. So one of the things that, as a Kenyan, I regret, I think going the technocratic way was good. Unfortunately, given the way our politics works, sometimes then those technocrats are unable to stand their ground, and they are not able to advance the cause of the country and end up being just appendages of a political party. In fact, like we saw in the past 5 years, not even a political party, but a faction of a political party. So we are between a rock and a hard place for now. But I think eventually we look for a balance between technocrats who can actually get the job done, and then some politicians who continue to be the public faces and voices of the coalition in power. Okay.
This is the thing. You see, during the process of vetting this particular nominees, what stood out for many was the net worth. And I think that is what took center stage. A lot of people just wanted to understand how much these people are worth. But what should have been the most important questions asked during this process? What should have been Kenyans, paying key attention to?
So that's an excellent question. So we are all fixated by the net worth, because everybody, in a capitalist society, we're chasing money. Those numbers in a country where I think the GDP per capita is, even now that we are, what do we call it, a middle-level economy, I think sits below or around $1,000 per capita. So of course, if somebody has a net worth, and a lot of these net worths, we are seeing people who are very average people 10 years ago, now heading towards billionaire status. It raises questions, but for me, that's more an integrity issue. And unless there's a specific charge around that, and Parliament did not really unpack that, the sort of disclosures we are making in Parliament are far less than the average Kenyan makes to their bank seeking even a loan of 50,000 shillings. So that needs to be looked at. Either we just have it as a line item, or we do away with it if we're not going to interrogate it fully. Because people have asked a lot of genuine questions. To achieve that sort of wealth, net worth, which we're looking at as in its most basic form, your assets minus your liabilities, what you may owe. What have you done? Because we're in an economy that for the majority of Kenyans is actually shrinking. What are you guys doing, you know, men and women? What are you doing? And what have you done over the past, say, 20 years that has allowed you to go from basically almost zero to you know, billionaire status? Yes. So we're fixated with that. But the more important thing is, and I'll single out Salim Vuria, because I watched quite a bit of his presentation on Saturday. When you, because his net worth was low by the standards of the other nominees, I think it was at about 120 million, although people were surprised, wow, how would a governor have such a low net worth? But they were able to quickly move to the actual issues around mining, you know, the blue economy and maritime services. So, and he presented himself, I mean, we'll judge him by his performance, but I think given that the majority of his presentation was around issues, that's what we wanted to see. Do you understand your docket? Are you seized with the key issues around it and how those key issues impact the daily lives of Kenyans? And do you have a plan? Because you can't have a detailed plan yet. You're not even confirmed to office, but do you have an idea? I saw something, a fact check on something that the agriculture nominee said, where he was saying that 60% of Kenya's GDP is agriculture. And one of the local stations fact checked and said, no, that number is actually 20%. So they should be, we should not have those sort of credibility gaps. If you've accepted nomination, you need to be, because these people have access to all manner of advisors, you know, at public cost. You should not, if it's a slip of the tongue, that's fine, but you have to be very, very clear about what you're going in to manage. And once again, I think the process is a bit rushed. That hour, is it enough to unpack 90 minutes? Yeah, 90 minutes. You probably can't do it. Yes, so we might have had a situation where, like with the principal secretaries, what we'll see based on what they did last time is you sit before the committee of the House. Sorry, what I mean by that is the House has many committees, so the one that is concerned with your docket. So we hope that there the interrogation will be much more detailed about the actual work that you've been nominated to do.
So, like you say, some of these things that they were being questioned, and some people, you know, don't have the facts right. Preparation then comes into place. Did they prepare enough for this, or to some extent, will just they knew that maybe if I walked in there, and I have been nominated, suggested by probably the President of the Republic, and he has a majority in the House, so probably this is just a formality. Was there proper, do you feel like there was proper preparation for this grilling process, and also just understanding of the docket itself?
So there's two things. So preparation, it should never be an issue, because as I've said, they have access to all the experts in Kenya. In fact, I think I even saw one nominee say that they have already been engaging with that with the civil servants in the ministry. So there's no shortage of information. However, the challenge now, if I look at it for the average Kenyan, you've gone in for an interview, and you know you're interviewing for company X, and you ask them a question about maybe revenue, and the number that you give is half or double what it actually is. That immediately is a black mark against you, and in many cases, if you make enough of those mistakes, then you would never succeed in such an interview. For us, then we need to ask ourselves, are the people that are answering the questions the same people that are grading the outcome? And if they are, then you see they're the wrong people to do it, because at its heart, that was not just a political process. It should also be a human resource process. If you're not seized of the issues now, when you've had 2 or 3 weeks to prepare, then what will it take for you to understand the issues? Are you the right person? And I don't know if they're using a checklist or how they're going to grade it. We'll see in the final reports. But if they're not doing that, then that's another shortcoming of the process.
And I believe we have a video that was supposed to be ushering this conversation. That's, you know, something in regards to that in this report that is expected this coming week, or this week. Why do I keep saying this coming week as if we are doing the weekend? But this is my Friday, understand me. So this week. Let's take a look at that particular report by Shadrach Kareria.
I, Aden Baradwale.
After a week-long Cabinet Secretary's nominees vetting process that was completed on Saturday, The appointment committee is tasked with the responsibility of approving or rejecting some CS nominees according to their performance during the interview.
Thank you very much.
However, according to a political analyst Herman Manyora, the entire process was a formality, as the MPs may approve all the nominees without considering their performance.
Next, of course, is Parliament itself will have gone through. Of course, after this committee, there's Parliament, plenary, then there's the President to nominate them. Then they are sworn in by the Chief Justice. It's as simple as that, and they become your ministers.
While punching holes in the entire process, Manyora stated that the committee should have gone deeper into key issues, such as investigating the source of wealth of each nominee, and not just cutting across.
The vetting is not vetting. Vetting is supposed to be a serious process. For example, if you say you have all this property, we would want to know how you got the property, not a breakdown of the things you have. There are people with integrity issues. Those integrity issues have not been interrogated by the vetting committee. To that extent, therefore, the vetting is just a formality. Then when you keep telling Kenyans, I have 500 million, 700 million, the vetting committee must know this will be of interest to Kenyans. So you must go beyond. It's not a catalog. You know, I don't think it's supposed to be a catalog of what you own. It's supposed to be something that resonates what people think. So if a junior politician who doesn't run any known business, who has never had a serious professional job, if he says I have 400 million shillings, Kenyans will want to know exactly how.
Manyora also undermined the effort by Azimio One Kenya coalition of appointing shadow cabinet secretaries to keep the government in check, as earlier stated by Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka.
Hivi majuzi baba akirudi, we are going to announce our shadow cabinet. Shadow cabinet, because we want to hold them to account.
But for this one, they can only do it for, really, it's not constitution. There's nothing in the constitution. There's no opposition in parliament. There's the majority and the minority side, not opposition. And that office is not there. So they cannot have a shadow cabinet. But they are free to look to oversight government in whichever way. If having ministers shadowing other ministers is their way, so be it. But to me, I find it useless. It doesn't help.
Shadrack Kareria, Lookuptv.
All right, now that is a report filed by Shadrack Kareria looking at the CS nominees report that's supposed to be coming out this week. I almost said this coming week. Cliff, let's continue this conversation, and just to pick from what Herman Manyora has said, something to do with the getting deeper into the wealth of these particular individuals, and that's what we said, because you're focusing so much on the wealth and not grilling on the job that they're going to be doing. When it comes to doing the job itself, moving forward, how do they make sure that they actually perform? How do we measure their success if we did not grill them properly when we are vetting them?
So this cabinet secretary role, it's a very interesting beast to understand, because at its heart, it is then a political role, because you serve under an elected president. So it's an administration that has come into office with the aspirations of Kenyan voters. But at the same time, it has a technical dimension, which is obviously leading policy. If you take, say, agriculture or mining or health, you know, these are key issues. They're tangible issues that have a very strong technical dimension. Under you have an entire bureaucracy, starting with the principal secretary all the way down to the lowest civil servant. So the expectation is that you don't necessarily have to be a genius yourself, and this is one thing that I think young people have to understand. You don't have to be a doctor to lead the health ministry, of course, because you have a team of experts. What you need to do is to have the mental and intellectual capacity and the ability to command a platform to direct policy. So if you're a doctor, that's a bonus, you know. So for example, you don't have to be a water engineer to run the water ministry, because it's multidimensional.
And I think that's where we get it wrong, because in most cases, when we are looking at who has been nominated, You say somebody has been nominated in the Ministry of Health. You're like, are they doctors? Will they understand what happens at the Ministry of Health? If somebody is transport and all that, you say, is he an engineer? Is she an engineer? Water and sanitation, like something you say. So youth and sports affairs, we want somebody who has been in the sports industry, who has been probably a player, an athlete or something like that, or has a representation of the youth. That's exactly what we believe. This is the person that will actually perform if they can actually attach themselves to that particular docket. That is the mind that we have as Kenyans, right?
Yes, so it's actually the wrong mindset, and even in the private sector, it's the wrong mindset. You're looking for somebody who is a leader, not a manager, because you have many managers already and within the ministry. But you're looking at somebody who can first assist that team or lead that team in defining policy and a strategic direction. And then remember, you only have 5 years because we have an election in 5 years' time. And then you need somebody who can drive that. And that's why it's not by mistake that the CS is not even the accounting officer. There are HR issues. So you can have the best plan. Say I was a doctor and I say, you know, the critical thing we have in Kenya is we don't have enough hospitals. Now we want a level 5 or level 6 hospital in every county in the next 5 years. Okay, that's a policy. How do we implement it? Now, doctors are not architects, they are not builders, they are not suppliers of critical equipment. So you need somebody who can bring teams of experts together and lead them and motivate them and inspire them, you know, and make sure that we've set the correct strategy and we're able to achieve it within 5 years or come close to achieving it. So what we were looking for and what we continue to look for from our cabinet secretaries is the ability to lead. So that's why we, people don't want people who are not necessarily eloquent, because if you have somebody sitting here and you give them 15 minutes, you'd want them to speak to Kenyans and tell them, this is what we want to achieve over the next 5 years. And once they've said that, that then becomes, in the private sector, we call that KPIs. NGOs talk about monitoring and evaluation. That is what we can judge them by. But if they cannot articulate those issues, and that's what sometimes some technocrats have had an issue with, but I see a lot of politicians will also have an issue with that, depending on their level of I want to say education, but it's like education has become a dirty word. It's like it's almost become a dirty word in Kenya. But their level of understanding of the strategic policy and requirements of the Kenyan population. So that's what we're looking for. So how do we hold them accountable? We'll have to wait for them to lay out their strategy. So you'd imagine that, okay, if we're following the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, then very quickly, hopefully by the end of this year, each ministry would then have a strategic document. Perhaps if it's very different from what the outgoing administration had, then they'll tweak that. If they're going to go along the lines of what is already in place, you know, the medium-term plans and Kenya Vision 2030, then that's fine. We'll hold them accountable. But they need to articulate what they will do, and that's the only way we can hold them accountable.
I want to take a short break here and come back with that other conversation. But before that, how important is it for the president right now to have CSs who do understand his manifesto?
100%, because how else would he implement it? He's one person. He's now the CEO of the country, and like I said, he's not going to be an expert in health, in mining, in education, that sort of thing. So he's going to trust that he's delegated that authority that comes from the Kenyan voters, to these individuals to drive that policy. The beauty of it is, and I hope this is where we'll get to, if somebody doesn't deliver, maybe you need some time, maybe you need a year or two, but let's not be afraid to change. Right now, politics has trumped, political expediency, in the sense, when I say politics, I don't mean generally. I mean that to win an election, you need strategy, you need a structure, you need resources, and a bit of luck. So right now, what we are calling rewarding people is paramount, because you're trying to hold a coalition together. But I think eventually, with time, then we should see that pendulum swing back to performance. Yes.
All right. So that could have been a contributor to how he actually came to start nominating this particular candidates, because he feels like they do understand his manifesto to some extent.
Yes, and remember, any president in his first term or her first term must always, from day one, have an eye on their second term. So you have to start either maintaining or crafting your next coalition, because Kenya politics is about coalition politics.
Started early though. Yes. We want to take a short break here on the program. When we come back, we'll be looking at the IBC, what exactly is happening at that particular place, and moving forward. Well, Chebukati, what kind of commission is he leaving behind? Don't go too far. This conversation continues in just a short while.
Good to have you join us on Heart to Heart.
We bring you stories of people who, despite the pressures they experienced, still trusted God to see them through.
The seeds that was sown in me helped me navigate and overcome that period of my life.
New testimonies, new insights, and even better revelation of the good things God has in store for us.
There is always a blessing waiting for someone in every episode.
Hi there, my name is George Washuri. I am so happy to see you, and today I am here to enumerate, to explain how we package our land investment. We have 5 levels of our property, and we classify these levels as 1 star, 2 stars, 3 star, 4 star, and 5 star. This is what we mean, that if you buy a property that is 1 star with Optiven, one of the things that is evident, the property is cheaper, is below $500,000. And this particular property is basically bare land. We only do subdivision, put the beacons, and then produce titles. The second level, we call it 2 star. This is prime land, whereby we grade the roads, we put a marking fence, do the beacons, and produce titles. The third level, we call it 3 stars. This 3 star is value added plots. We do the malam, we do the water, we do the mesh fence, and there's a caretaker on site. The fourth level is 4 star. 4 star is ready to build development. We do very nice maram roads, we plant the trees, we put the water tower, we also put a caretaker on site, and finally, the 5 star. The 5 star is premier, is the top level, and this one, we do cable roads, we do water management through underground culverts, we do underground power, we do fountain for water, we do beautiful and nice permanent gates, we do perimeter wall, and also do install the CCTV, and the whole property is manned by uniformed security. Some of these properties, these 5-star properties, we do a clubhouse and also construct swimming pool. Thank you once more for trusting Optiven. We value you. We are at Absa Plaza, 14th floor and 15th floor. God bless you.
So much for staying with us here on the program. Now, you're just in for the second part of this conversation. We are looking at the IEBC. The president recently, that is last week, announced vacancy for Chebukati's IEBC job and 2 other commissioners who are leaving. They've been in office from January 2017. Now, it's time for them to leave, and we've already started advertising for those particular positions. We want to set up a panel to look into that. Now, Cliff, let me come to you and look at IEBC right now. The way it has conducted itself since it was formed, that is in since this commission came, that this commission has actually came into office in 2017. What would be your assessment of IEBC from 2017 to this particular time?
I have to confess, I've not been a big fan of IEBC. I don't think there's any IEBC commission that has impressed the majority of Kenyans.
Okay.
You remember in August 2017, or just before that, when the IBC IT manager was murdered, Christopher Msando, that was terrible. And this particular commission, I don't think has recovered from that. So that August 2017, it's like with any commission, you can imagine that the biggest blow to not only your reputation but also the conduct of your affairs is when an election that you've overseen is overturned by the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. So it's not about you and I criticizing them. That was a decision of our Supreme Court.
Exactly.
Yes. Subsequent to that, once again, and I know that when we look at it objectively, the IBC is not independent again, because the IBC has to be funded, even though they do have a budget in place, that money still has to be given to them. And what we saw over the past 2 years was a very deliberate effort by the administration to use that to control IBC. Their funding was delayed. Then there was a big mess with voter registration and that sort of thing. So look, at the end of the day, they did what they had to do, because another measure for us in Kenya is what is the outcome of the election in terms of peace. Because in Kenya, unlike other places, people actually die when an election goes.
It's a do-or-die process.
Yes, it is literally a do-or-die process. So I'll give the outgoing chairman and these two commissioners, I'll give them maybe a C.
A C.
Yeah, they just passed.
And it's average.
Yeah, but the fiasco we saw in that last week, as they're announcing the results with the 4 new commissioners and all that, that is terrible. So we a country that thrives on political turmoil. So if you ask me, I think let's not just get rid of these 3 commissioners. Let's just keep trying.
Let's keep trying.
Let's get rid of everyone and start afresh.
Now, this is the thing. I want to look at how Chebukati has managed the place itself. He's been a chair that in this election, 4 commissioners had dissenting views on exactly how he was conducting the election. In the last election, he was abandoned by other commissioners, the likes of Roslyn Akombe, Koni Maina. They all left him at that particular time. As a person that was managing that and just unable to probably, I don't want to say unable, but that's what it is, unable to hold the commission together, the person that is coming next, what should be their focus?
So, despite me just giving the commission itself a C, I think just from the outside looking in, I actually do admire Chebukati. The majority of people cannot withstand that sort of pressure. You can imagine last time people wanted him to go one direction and accused him of doing this. This time they came back, and one thing that really surprised Kenyans was the ability to publish those Form 34As almost in real time. So that gave the election a lot of credibility, despite what the Azimio coalition alleged in court. So him as an individual, I actually do have a lot of respect for him, because of course, remember, he does not control all the levers of power in Kenya, not even in the commission. He also delegates authority, and it's such a big beast, and there's so much at stake in that commission that no one person can guarantee its performance. But granted, he's overseen 2 elections, and this one was definitely better than the last one, so he has made progress. So the incoming person needs to build on that process. Now, we hope that it will be somebody who will continue, maybe in private, I don't know how they do it, or in public, to continue to press the government to release the funding that is required. And I'm not sure, but I would like to see, just like the judiciary, I would like to see, if we were to get to that point, the IBC have a constitutional allocation, and an independent control of its funding, so that the things we need to do now, like civic education, is wanting, because they never have the money in time. They are always fighting fires. So we'd like the next person to really, in this lull, because now you only have, I guess, by elections between now and, say, 2025, before things get exciting again. I'd like to see the capacity of IBC built. So let's look at somebody who is not necessarily a political actor. Let's look for somebody who is a good leader, and somebody who can inspire managers, and then let that person go to war and fight for independence of funding. because that is the beginning of the IEBC being truly independent,
all right,
as its name suggests.
Okay, now that is clear for Tega. I want to take this story here that was packaged here at Lookuptv. Just take a look at Chebukati leaving the stage and what that means, and then we come back to this conversation and just look at now what kind of face it has, and also in the next election, how do we conduct it in a better way. All right, Director. He walked into the IEBC offices in January 2017. 6 years later, after overseeing 2 general elections, Wafula Chebukati walks out as the chair of a commission that has been marred by divisions among commissioners. January 17th is the last day the embattled chair will be in office. And as his tenure comes to a close, the president sets the stage for the search for another chair and the 2 exiting commissioners. The notice reads, and I quote, "The tenure of the chairperson and 2 members of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission is set to lapse on January 17, 2023, having been appointed on the 18th January 2017, with the Gazette notices 399 and 400 of 2017. The first schedule of the IEBC Act then requires the president to appoint a selection panel in charge of recruiting new commissioners at least 6 months before the lapse of the term of the chairperson or members of the commission.
We should have a panel to appoint the next commissioners. Now that panel should consist of 2 persons from 2 men and 2 women from the Public Service Commission. Then we need to have 1 person nominated by the LSK and 1 person by the Council of Churches. That means now that yesterday the Gazette notice was issued, the LSK needs within 7 days to nominate a person and forward the name to the Public Service Commission. Then the council for the Church Council also need to appoint 2 persons and forward the names to the Public Service Commission. And then the Public Service Commission is supposed to now nominate the 2 men and 2 women and forward the names to the presidents. Then the president is supposed to nominate to appoint the 7-member committee within 14 days.
According to the IEBC Act, the office of the chairperson or member of the commission shall become vacant if the holder dies, resigns from office by notice in writing addressed to the president, or is removed from office. The commissioners to be recruited will join Vice Chairperson Juliana Cherera and Commissioners Irene Masit, Francis Wanderi, and Justice Nyang'aya, who are facing ouster bids sponsored by President William Ruto supporters over their decision to disown the August 9th presidential election.
The commissioners' tenure of office is secured by law. So Parliament alone, with the current law as it is spelled out, they can't chase them out of office when they use that word. But probably what they can do is amend the law. You see, Parliament is they have the power to amend the law. So if they're able to amend the IEBC Act and probably provide for now a way out, or probably convince the commissioners to resign, that would be the only avenue. Otherwise, the law has already secured the tenure of the commission.
The fate of the 4 commissioners now lies with the National Assembly, and as Chebukati tenure comes to an end, what will he be remembered for?
Looking back at how he has conducted his work, historically since 2007, we've not had a commission chairman who has handled 2 successive elections. So that's one thing that really stands out about Chebukati, that he was firm enough to be able to handle the elections in 2017 and the elections in 2022. You might notice that at some time the politicians, sometime after the 2017 elections, some politicians tried to drive him out of office. So for me, he comes out as a chairman who has been firm, who has stood his ground basically, because that is a very politically heated kind of job or kind of seat, unlike many other seats or unlike many other commission chairmen that we see out there.
He is a chair that led a divided commission that saw the exit of Roslina Kombe, Margaret Mwachanya, Paul Kurgat and Koni Maina, who resigned, and later their replacements holding divergent opinions. Cherera, Nyang'aya, Wanderi and Masit disagreed with their boss, setting motion for a court battle on the legality of the 2022 presidential elections that was termed as opaque.
Other commissioners, the 4 remaining commissioners that we have, the vice chair and the 4 others, their tenure of office expires in 2027. That means 1 month after the election, that will be in September 2027. Now that means the new commissioners that come in will need to have, we have seen a very divided commission during the last presidential elections. And so we expect that we need to have a lot of harmony between now the existing members, that the 4 members and the 7 and the 3 that are coming on board. So I believe the first thing that they should do is just have a workshop or have our boarding kind of exercise that at least we don't expect to see what happened.
From the kind of tone that the president adopted when calling him a hero, you know, all that, I expect that he will land somewhere else. My view is Chebukati is somebody we are going to see in the public limelight for some time. Of course, unless he himself decides that I'm no longer interested in being in the public limelight. Perhaps the way Chief Justice Emeritus Maraga decided that I want to go home and take care of my grandchildren. But from the tone that the president adopted, I expect that he might land somewhere, perhaps some commission chairman somewhere else.
Chebukati also goes down in history as a commissioner that once led a bungled election in 2017. As he exits office, the chair of the poll body leaves a face and commission that will have to work hard to show a united front and have the people believe in its process. Brian Amuai, Lookuptv, Nairobi. All right, now, Cliff, should we do away with all commissioners and start afresh and look at a new IBC, probably one that everybody, because let's just say it the way it is. The 4 commissioners, if they are going to remain, some people will still have trouble with them. Different sides of the political divide might not want actually to work with them.
You know, I saw a tweet, I think it's yesterday or today, by Chebukati himself, where he was addressing this matter, and one of the things that he mentioned that stood out was the phrase institutional memory. It's very important to have that transition. We don't want a new team coming in with each successive election. But having said that, whichever team is running the election needs to be credible. That's the challenge that we are having. Now, the 4 commissioners that we currently have that I were just appointed, I think, last year, unfortunately, their performance, during this election, it left a lot to be desired. So whether they can recover from that, I don't know. But as we've just heard anyway, the Constitution guarantees their tenure, and we also don't want necessarily a witch hunt to hound them out of office. I suppose, if there should be a mechanism for them to defend themselves, and if that's fine and they explain themselves satisfactorily, let them continue in office. Because it's also revolutionary and very. We have by-elections coming up now, because I think we have
in December.
Many people that are appointed that have left office. So again, you need a team to manage that. It would be difficult if we kicked everybody out now. With no chairman. I think the vice chair is now the de facto chair then in the absence, because if I recall, Chebukati and the 2 commissioners are going on leave, terminal leave. So it's not the time for that turmoil. And I think also, just so that we tone down the political temperature, let's not always be in such a hurry. I know I was saying before, I was just half joking when I was saying let's kick everyone out. It's more than the people. It's about procedure. So let's try and get it right so that it doesn't really matter who the face or the name is. But the IBC as a commission, can, as an enterprise or as an organization, can discharge its mandate regardless of who the 7 faces are.
Because you talk about something to, let's get it right, and I remember when we are going to the Supreme Court, when there was that petition and all that, people, why do we always go to the Supreme Court? And somebody said, we need to always have this conversation. We need to always petition. We need to always file a case until we get it right, because it's very important that we get the process right. Because if you have a false process, then you have, the results of that process will actually be questioned. Let's get to now how this particular institution might actually, gain your trust as a Kenyan. You look at it and you say, I can trust this institution to go do a credible elections. When you sit down and look at it, what do you feel they can do to actually get to convince you that they're
so
with the credibility, something like
you notice, Brian, that in between elections, IBC is always covered in glory. They actually handle many by-elections. Unfortunately, many of our representatives pass away and that sort of thing. With the petitions, people are kicked out of office, and then they handle that. Very few complaints. Campaigning goes smoothly. The election, maybe very isolated incidences of violence that are not an IBC challenge, and then that's it. The heat is turned on maybe a year or two to the election, maybe a year. That is as a result of, particularly this past, I keep going back to this past 5 years or so, where there's an active effort by the politicians to manage or manipulate IEBC in their favor. Because again, in Kenya, the presidential election is key, because once you win that, then you have almost full unfettered control of the levels of power in Kenya. The only check is the judiciary. So in terms of what the IEBC can do, it goes back to funding. Just like we've seen recently the setting up of that judiciary fund, if we could have the same sort of mechanism for IEBC, so that IEBC's budget from 2022, so its annual budget has a strategic plan, and that is funded on an annual basis up to and including the election year, without delays, then we would see the IEBC then take its rightful place as an independent electoral and boundaries commission. I'm aware that I think very soon, within these 5 years, we need to actually have that boundary review that the BBI was talking about. So you see, that will be another bone of contention. So where is it in the planning? And I think as we were talking earlier, you said what is happening now should have happened 4 months ago, so 6 months to the end of their tenure. But of course, IEBC was also caught up unwillingly in a very, very volatile political process. So the outgoing regime, I know it sounds like I'm criticizing them a lot, but you see, we have to judge them by their actions. The outgoing regime subjected everything, court orders, the constitution, to a political agenda for 2022. So some of these things have fallen through the cracks, and hopefully so in a sense, what we have done as a country is we have violated the constitution and the regulations, and the laws. So hopefully we begin to change that and it doesn't happen again. So let them work on this funding thing so that their strategic plan that was released earlier this year is fully funded and they can roll out their programs. So that by the time we're getting to, say, 2026, we don't have this issue of the chairman again making a public appeal to the government to fund an independent commission's operations. That I think was unfair to Chebukati and his team, and hopefully we don't see that again. Otherwise, then we end up with the same sort of tension building up and some of the issues around, voter registration and preparedness. Because you remember, IBC only became an issue again towards the very end, when we saw some commissioners flying out to Greece, and we're wondering, when were these tenders put out, who's printing these things, what is being printed, when is it arriving? And it's always because of that starving the commission of funding until the very last minute to try and gain some sort of mileage, depending on what sort of the political divide you're on. Yes.
So how as we wind up, how do we draw the line from remove this institution? And I know it deals with a lot of politics, but remove these institutions from politicians so that it just carries its mandate without interference from these other sectors.
So you can't separate it, because again, it is a political process. The IEBC exists to shepherd mainly a political process around elections. It also does a lot of work around boundaries and that sort of thing, but its key impact on Kenyan society is a political process. So already, if we just adhere to the law, there must be competition in terms of who applies and how they're selected and everything. Because in fact, it's not just the independence of the IEBC. The challenge starts with the Public Service Commission, because if they're the ones receiving the applications and vetting candidates, and then the committees that are appointed around that, I think there's a select committee that looks at these sort of things, an appointed committee like we've just heard. That's where the problem starts. Are those people truly independent? So we've had LSK is nominating somebody to start this process in the churches. Now, in our wisdom, we've said that those are the people with the most integrity, and we hope that they'll do that, because it's like we say in IT, garbage in, garbage out. Yeah, if that process is already flawed, it doesn't matter what happens then with Parliament and so on and so forth. So again, once again, we look to those people, and we need to interrogate the decisions that are made. Hopefully, LSK and the churches will nominate people that are acceptable and credible to Kenyans, and then that gives us a bit of confidence. Then you see, once you're in office, you need to have the stamina and the capacity to support and safeguard the independence of your office. That comes down now to your personal qualities, and hopefully that's what we'll interrogate in the next few years.
Okay. My last question. He's been termed a hero. Is he a hero too?
Okay, hero, what's the definition of hero, you know? But the thing is, like I was saying earlier, he oversaw a bungled election in 2017. That was terrible because in many ways, there are still things, there are repercussions of that election that we are still feeling today, you know, starting with loss of life, the economy that was already on the edge, you know, it fell off a cliff, you know, if we are to be honest. But subsequently, he was vindicated by the same court this time. So I won't necessarily say he's a hero. I'll just say that in the final analysis, he's a Kenyan that took up a job that many would fail at, and he didn't deliver the first time, he delivered the second time. So he can go home happily in the sense that he delivered on the mandate that he was given under very tough circumstances.
That would have been his mission probably, because there's a time that there's so much, you know, clamor to have him out of office, and the different sides of the political divide just saying Chebukati out, but he was so adamant to stay in office and make sure that he oversees this election once again. Maybe his motivation was, I want to not be remembered as somebody who, you know, oversaw a bungled election, then retired, they were, you know, forced to retire. I want to do something different this time around, and right now that's exactly what he did, right?
Yeah, so I think look, history I think will judge him fairly, but it's not for us now, because it's still current affairs, you know. Let the next generation analyze it and write the books, and I think in its entirety he'll be judged fairly. Because he made the best of a bad situation.
All right. All right, Cliff Ortega there, thank you so much for making time for this conversation here on The Morning Drift. I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Like we said, Cliff is already a family member. So you will be seeing him most of the time sitting here with me in most cases, probably on Mondays when we're discussing matters current affairs. And on matters current affairs and the conversation here, that is what we were touching on. Cabinet Secretary report expected to come out anytime from now. And also Chebukati leaving office will also be following that and be updating you on the process that is expected to be happening in regards to setting up a panel. People will be applying. Will you be going for the commissioner's job? You don't feel like you can be part of the IBC?
No, because just like the IBC, I'm also independent.
That does it for us here on the program. My name is Brian Amuai. Thank you so much once again for making time for this conversation. Simba Elijah Charles Kiage will be joining you in a few minutes with Look Up Business. Don't go too far. Stay tuned for that.